Some stars become famous because of their talent. Some become famous because they're in the right place at the right time. But there are also those who become icons because they're so perfectly portrayed that the public forgets that behind that image lies a real person. And Katy Perry's story is perhaps one of the most interesting examples. Because if you look back at her journey, you'll realize something rather unbelievable. The person millions of fans around the world once adored may not have been her original self. Before becoming Katy Perry, she was Katy Hudson, a girl who grew up in a strict religious environment in California. Her family was deeply committed to their faith, and music wasn't seen as a tool for fame, but as part of conveying that faith. Katy started singing at a very young age in church, learned to write music in her teens, and released her first gospel album under her real name before she was 17. Listening back to those songs, it's hard to recognize the image of the woman who would later appear in colorful outfits and create global hits. There was no rebellion, no unconventional spirit, and certainly no pop star image we know today. But that album failed. It didn't make an impact, didn't sell as expected, and didn't open the career path she hoped for. And that very moment marked the most crucial turning point. Instead of continuing down that path, she left the world of religious music, moved to Los Angeles, and started over. She changed her name, changed her image, and entered an industry where personality wasn't just expressed, but also designed. After years of experimentation, signing contracts and having projects canceled, finally an opportunity arose. People in the industry saw something very valuable in her: a memorable face, a versatile voice, and the ability to adapt to change. Then one day, Katy Hudson disappeared, and Katy Perry was created. No longer the girl singing about faith and salvation, but a bold, colorful, and controversial pop star. When her first song exploded globally, it wasn't just the emergence of a new artist. It was the moment a complete brand was officially born. But interestingly, that transition wasn't just successful. It was almost perfect. After years of struggling to find her place, Katy Perry finally stepped in at the right time when pop needed a new face. Rebellious enough to grab attention, but approachable enough to be accepted by the masses. Her new image was no longer confrontational rebellion, but a carefully packaged version, bold yet playful, sexy yet not distant, different yet familiar enough to appear on radio and television. And that formula worked harder than anyone could have imagined. After her initial success, Katy didn't stop. She consistently released catchy songs with vibrant colors and simple yet impactful messages that resonated with the masses. It was a period where her music could be heard almost everywhere: in cars, shopping malls, on television, and at parties. The peak came when she entered what is considered her golden age. In just a few short years, Katy Perry created a string of hits and set records previously only achieved by the biggest icons of pop. But the remarkable thing wasn't the number of hits. What made Katy special was that she didn't simply sell music. She sold a feeling. Listeners turned to her to feel happier, more confident, and more special. Her colorful music videos, massive stage performances, and consistently energetic image made her an icon of an era where pop music didn't need to be profound, just big enough to make people forget reality for a few minutes. From there, Katy Perry transcended the boundaries of a successful singer. She became a global brand. Her tours sold out, endorsement deals poured in, major awards recognized her, and the pinnacle was when she took to the stage in front of hundreds of millions as a true pop culture icon. At the time, many believed this formula would last forever. But the history of pop music follows a simple rule: any formula that's too perfect will eventually fail. But the problem with any formula for success is that it makes people believe that simply repeating it long enough will yield the same results. And that's when things started to change for Katy Perry. After years at the top, the image that had made her an icon gradually lost its novelty. The public changes faster than any branding strategy, and what they were looking for was no longer colorful stages or catchy, inspirational slogans. They wanted more authenticity, more personality, and more consistency between the real person and the artist's image. This is when the gap between Katy Perry and the person behind Katy Perry began to be scrutinized. One of the biggest turning points came from the controversies surrounding Dr. Luke, the producer who was closely associated with her most successful period. As accusations and legal battles erupted, many artists, fans, and the media began to question the responsibility of those who had collaborated with him. Katy didn't openly take sides and chose to distance herself from the debate, but that very silence created an unexpected reaction. For an artist once seen as an icon of women's empowerment, her silence made some viewers feel that image was no longer consistent. It wasn't because the public demanded that artists address every social issue, but because when an image is built around certain values, people begin to expect the artist to react according to those values.
At the same time, Katy's music entered a more challenging phase. She tried more mature directions, incorporating more social messages and moving away from her familiar candy pop image. But instead of creating a sense of natural development, many viewers perceived this change as a rebranding process rather than an artistic transformation. Subsequent projects were still heavily invested in, still featured beautiful stages and strong promotional campaigns, but the very thing that once connected the audience seemed to have weakened.
And this is the hardest thing for a pop star. Success built on image. When that image begins to falter, everything else is viewed differently. What was once considered bold is now seen as forced. What was once considered confident is now seen as calculated. Katy Perry didn't lose her talent overnight, but she began to lose something more important: the belief that the public could still see the real person behind the brand they once loved. But perhaps the most noteworthy aspect of Katy Perry's story isn't her loss of chart-topping status, but how the public's perception of her changed. For years, Katy represented a very typical pop star of the 2010s. Everything had to be bigger than reality, more colorful than reality, and more entertaining than reality. Audiences back then didn't demand artists be overly personal or overly authentic. They wanted songs that made them happy, performances that made them forget their daily lives, and images that were dazzling enough to become iconic. Katy did that almost perfectly. But then, tastes changed. A new generation of artists emerged with a completely different approach. Instead of building an almost surreal image, they told more personal stories, revealed more facets of themselves, and made audiences feel like they were connecting with a person, not a brand. In that context, every move Katy made began to be scrutinized more closely. Performances once considered fun were now called over the top. Media campaigns once seen as clever were now viewed as attention-seeking attempts. Each comeback is no longer met with the same fanfare as a major event, but rather a test of whether she's still relevant in the modern era. And this is the paradox of fame. When you become such a huge icon, the public doesn't just judge your new work. They compare you to your most glorious self. Katy isn't competing with younger artists. She's competing with the memories millions have of herself. It's a very difficult battle to win. Because no matter how good a song is, if it doesn't evoke the same feeling as when you first heard Firework, or during her peak, many will call it a failure. But perhaps a fairer conclusion isn't Katy Perry is past her prime. Her career remains one of the greatest success stories in modern pop. More thought-provoking is another question. What happens when an artist is built on a perfect formula, but the world no longer wants it? Perhaps the issue was never age or the loss of talent. Perhaps the real challenge was finding a way to evolve while remaining true to herself. And that might be the next chapter Katy Perry is still searching for.